You're listening
to the CD Baby DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 45 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin. I'm your host for the show. And before we get into today's interview, I just wanted to mention that it's been great interacting with those of you who have taken up the Twitter challenge with me. I know we've been talking a lot about it lately, but beyond Twitter, it's been really apparent to me since we got back from our holiday break how much better this show is when we have the chance to interact with you. So whether it's email, the listener line, our Facebook page, or the comments section on cdbabypodcast.com, which, speaking of the comments section, there's been a very interesting exchange there that took place this past week in the comments for episode number 44. So you might want to check that out. But it's been great hearing and interacting with many of you, and I think it just serves to make the show better. So if you haven't already, I would highly recommend you join in on the conversation. Well, for this week's episode, I interviewed Jason Van Orden. Jason is a podcasting and internet marketing expert, and I know we've talked a little bit about podcasting in some of the past episodes, but I figured it'd be good to get Jason on the show to really lay a solid framework for podcasting, and beyond that, marketing your music over the internet. So let's get to that interview. Well, Jason, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Kevin.
One of the main reasons I wanted you on the show is because of your internet marketing, your experience with podcasting, and tell us a little bit about what you've done with that in the past.
All right. Well, specifically with podcasting, that's something that when podcasting was brand new in 2005 and kind of showed up on my radar, I actually, funny thing is I heard about it first through an email newsletter I was receiving from Bob Baker, who I'm sure many of your listeners know of. Yeah. And I've, subscribed to his newsletter for a while. And I'm like, what is this podcasting thing? And I did some Googling and looking around, and immediately all of a sudden it gelled and like, okay, this is going to be a big deal for communications, for media, for promotion on all angles. This is huge. And I was like, I want to be an expert on podcasting because I thought it was very audio related. I'd been an audio engineer and a musician in the past, so I thought that's perfect. And at the time I was into internet business and working on my own. So for the last few years, I've been, teaching lots of businesses, lots of, different professionals and people on how to use podcasting to promote themselves and connect with their market. And so, I've been involved. And then on the side, I also have a very successful podcast called Internet Business Mastery, which is all about, doing business online. And so learned a lot of really cool things and what works with internet marketing and what works with, connecting with a given market, which are important things for musicians, whether they like to think about it or not.
Yeah, I think what I see from most musicians is, they have a good album, they have a decent following, and then when it comes to the whole web presence and marketing themselves in a way that's effective, a lot of them fall short, where they just, I think, start spamming their audience and get frustrated when they don't see results. I was just having a conversation with a coworker, and she was talking about people like to consume specific forms of media, and that it's important to get your information out in all of those forms of media, and like one being podcasting. Is that something you would agree with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, last year, I had been spending 2 or 3 years talking specifically to podcasters about podcasting. So people, whether it was businesses or whether it was artists or whoever that wanted to podcast. But then I made a strong statement actually at the beginning of last year. I said, look, if you really want to succeed in this and whatever you're trying to do, whether it's to make money, get a message out, influence people, whatever you're trying to do, stop being a podcaster. And of course, people are like, what? And, what I meant was not stop producing a podcast, but start thinking of yourself as a content creator, as a leader in your market or an artist or whoever you are, and you're just a content creator and you need to get it out across as many channels as possible, because in this day and age, there's so many great ways to get your message out, whether it's through podcasting, through online video and like YouTube or blogging and email newsletters and all these things, and you need to be using them all because you know, Web 2.0, if you've heard that phrase and wonder, well, how does that apply to me? If nothing else, remember this. It's about showing up wherever your market is looking for you. Facebook, MySpace, wherever it is. And it's actually not as much work as you think. You can just repurpose and reuse your content across all these channels very efficiently once you get a hang of it. It's just bit by bit, you start whittling away.
So say someone is, an artist out there is producing a podcast. How do they go about even getting it out there? I mean, I know most of our artists know what a podcast is because they listen to us, but they haven't taken the step to try even produce one. How do you start getting those channels going, whether it be RSS or how do you do that? Okay.
Well, of course, we can talk from the technical level, which I can give some pointers on, but I think one of the places to start is just the planning or the why of it all. It's like, you know, you may be wondering, well, why in the world should I, as an artist, even do a podcast? And hopefully by now, artists have realized podcasts are great places to send their music and have them played because maybe your local radio station's kind of tough to get your play on or whatever. But what about your own podcast? Well, you know, again, it comes back to what are you trying, you know, whatever you're trying to do, make money, influence people, and what is your goal as a musician? And I would imagine if you're making music, you want people to listen to it. You want some kind of action there. Buy my music, attend my concerts, tell other people about me, vote for me on the whatever, call the radio station and request. There's all these actions you want your market to take, right? Well, let's step backwards from that. Action. Well, the biggest thing to get people to act is if you have some kind of trust and influence with them. So they see you as a trusted person. They see you as somebody they connect with. They have that relationship. And so, you know, when artists get all hung up on, marketing so hard, selling so hard, I don't want to, you know, think of it as you're just trying to get to know new people, make a relationship with them so that then once that relationship and trust is built up, it's just a matter of asking them and they're more than happy to do, you know, call the radio station, buy your stuff, whatever the case may be. So we're trying to get to trust and influence. Well, in this day and age, one of the best, there's so many venues and avenues and channels for doing that, and podcasting is such a great one because they get to hear your voice and who you are behind the scenes. I mean, anybody listening to this right now, think of what one of your favorite musicians is, and you know who you've signed up for their email newsletter, right? And that email newsletter, how often does it come out? Well, I know that there's a couple I'm subscribed to, and I forget that I'm even subscribed to them, and then all of a sudden, months and months and months later, one ends up in my inbox, and it's like, I have a new album coming out. It's like, cool, but what have you been doing the last 2 years? I forgot you existed, you know? Like the relationship was just dropped and it didn't matter until they needed me to buy the album. So there was a disconnect there. You know, it would have been really cool, you know, hey, and if you think about that favorite artist, would you not have liked to have maybe heard a bit of them in their bedroom picking out that new tune on their guitar? Or maybe hearing them in the studio talking to their producer, trying to figure out what tracks are going on the CD, or maybe them and they're on their tour talking about, you know, what it was like to play their first time in a 2,000 person venue, you know, whatever the case may be. These are all stories that are part of developing that relationship. Okay. So that is to say, you have those stories to tell, you have those pieces of information, and so don't let that disconnect happen in your relationship. So that's the why.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I personally love podcasting, because I think it is a stripped down form of media where it's not a professionally produced radio show necessarily. It can be just you behind the scenes with an artist. And I'm surprised more artists don't take advantage of that. Even just little, like, here's a songwriting session, here's us in the studio type storyline. But part of it, I think, is due to the technical aspects, which I know it'd be good for you to touch on that as well.
Yeah, so the other obstacle would be, well, just how do I do this? So let's say you're convinced, you know, the first obstacle is the why, and do not underestimate the why. It's absolutely, you know, you will see major cool things happen if you take advantage of that. So now let's talk about how not to let the technical things get in your way. Well, like you said, it can be completely informal. It can be very easy. I mean, right here, we're sitting in your office. You've got a little portable recorder. You know, you can get one of those for a couple $100, maybe, you know, $200 or $300 or $400, depending on how nice you want one. But, you know, even if I think most musicians probably have a computer at home and you can record on your computer. And most musicians probably have some kind of microphone around. I mean, it's a pretty common thing for musicians to have. So if you've got a microphone and you've got your computer, you've already got what you need. And you just need to get that microphone into your computer, and you might already have some kind of nice little USB interface. Now, if for some reason you do not have a mic, you don't have anything at all, just go get a USB microphone. And I say USB microphone because that'll get digital straight into your computer, nice clean signal. You can get it for like $80. There's a Samson microphone, Samson, Samson, CO1U. Go buy that thing, plug it straight into your computer, Mac or PC, and you've got your voice, your signal going into the computer. Free software, Audacity, and go download Audacity, hit record, and record into Audacity. Now, more than likely, you're listening to this, you're a musician, you might have Cakewalk, you might have, SoundForge, you might have something like that. Great. Whatever it is, just something you can record your audio file into and then turn it into an MP3. That's all a podcast is an MP3 file. Just like you turn your music into an MP3 and upload it to the internet, take you sitting in the studio talking to your producer, you in your bedroom writing a song. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. Create that MP3, and that's the start. Now, at the very basic, you can just throw that up on your website with the link, okay, to download. You can at least send it out to your email newsletter, which I hope everyone listening to this has an email newsletter. That's another thing we can talk about. But, send it to your email newsletter, put a link on your homepage and say, I've got this MP3 you can download. Now, strictly speaking, that may not be technically a podcast, because really what makes a podcast is not that it's just an audio file, but that it's kind of a serial thing, meaning, just like you watch multiple episodes in a row of your favorite TV show, same thing with the podcast. So, every other week, or at the very least once a month, just make one of these episodes. Like I said, 5-10 minutes is fine, and put it up on your website. Well, if you're going to be making these episodic episodes, it'd be really cool if people could just automatically get them as soon as you create it, right? I imagine a lot of listeners to this are doing that. They're in iTunes and they subscribe to it. So that's what makes the podcast is just like your TiVo set up to record your favorite TV show. The podcast in iTunes, you subscribe, and as soon as Kevin releases a new CD Baby podcast, there it is. It's downloaded for you, ready to listen to. So I guess the question would be, well, how do I create that subscription mechanism? Well, you need what's called a feed. And, without getting too technical, anytime you've subscribed to a blog, you've subscribed to a feed. Anytime you've subscribed to a podcast on iTunes, you've subscribed to a feed. It's just basic information about your podcast. It says, here's the title, here's the description, here's the list of episodes and where they can be downloaded from. And the easiest way to create a feed is just use a blog. Go to a blogging platform like WordPress.com is one that you could use. Libsyn is a great service, Libsyn. They give you the feed and the little blog and make it easy to upload your audio. They give you hosting for your audio. So there's a couple I can recommend, but that's the easiest thing to do is use a blog to publish your podcast. And so there you go. Create the audio file, post it to your blog. It'll be put into this feed, and then you take that feed and you submit it for free into iTunes. iTunes is the biggest of all the podcast directories and most popular because of the iPod and the iPhone and everything like that. And once you've got it put into iTunes, then that's where you can start directing people there. People start finding it, and off you go. So, that's in a nutshell, obviously, but, hopefully that gives a little bit of the direction to go, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. Yeah. And I think, to me, the thing I like about the podcast and the RSS feed is the ability, like you mentioned, for it to be there when you want to watch it. I get used to the DVR. I record all the shows. I hardly ever watch a show on TV when it actually airs. I go back, and that's what I love about podcasts. I have all these that I subscribe to. I should go back. They're there. I saw online you had mentioned 5 things that people generally overlook when they're releasing a podcast. And a couple of them were like good title description, good description about the podcast, search engine optimization. Can you kind of describe how those things play into how the podcast goes out over the internet? Sure. For people to listen to your podcast, it needs to be found. You should let your current fans know. You should talk about it at your shows, talk about it in your email newsletter, talk about it in your on your site. But it's also a place that people can just find and discover you. Maybe that will be their first exposure to you is the podcast. And so you want to get that podcast, again, in Web 2.0 fashion, get it out everywhere that potential fans may be looking. Okay, so let's take something that a lot of musicians may already be familiar with, and that is a MySpace page. A lot of musicians create a MySpace page, and they want people to find that MySpace page that might be interested in the type of music they're doing. Well, one of the most valuable things that you have on that MySpace page for people to find you is the sounds like field. It says, who do you sound like? And unfortunately, a lot of musicians overlook the importance of that. And they hate trying to classify themselves and say they sound like something. And actually, something I learned from Derek Sivers, who originally founded CD Baby, is he said, look, one of the stupidest things you can do is just be like, oh, my music's like whatever. It's kind of we really can't classify it. I mean, who's going to go to a grocery store or something, or a cool new bookstore if you're like, oh, there's this great store. Oh, what's it like? I don't know. It's not like really anything that you've ever. They're like, okay, sure, whatever, But if you tell them it's a cross between this, and it's kind of like Starbucks, but more local, and then maybe they're like, oh, I should check that out, So come up with something like that for your music, right? So you come up by entering specific keywords into that sounds alike field. Maybe people will search and say, you know what, I really like to find a new indie band that's like Metallica or whatever, right? So let's take that to the podcast. You put it in iTunes. What's someone going to be searching for in iTunes? They might be searching for certain keywords, certain, maybe on their mind, they're like, Portland music, or I don't know, whatever you got to be thinking about what might people be searching for, band names, style names, things like that, and use those keywords in the title of your podcast, use those keywords in the description of your podcast that goes into iTunes, because that's what's going to let people, when they search, maybe your podcast will come up at the top and say, oh, if they're like Portland independent music, or if they're like New York City hardcore, or something like that, your podcast might come up and be something that they find. So when you're trying to be found in YouTube, iTunes, MySpace, all these places, be thinking about keywords, be thinking about what might somebody search for in order to find something like me. And don't be afraid to classify yourself, because that's how those people are going to be doing it, is thinking of you in those kinds of terms that they're familiar with. And that's how you can be found.
Is there a point where you can go too far with the keywords? Like, I've gone to websites where it's all it is just someone had put in a whole list of keywords, and it just seems like at that point they're just trying too hard. Is that still effective, or is it just clutter at that point?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't want to lie about your keywords. I mean, don't put Britney Spears just because that's one of the most searched things on the, because the bait and switch is never going to win. Somebody's going to show up and they're going to see your, I don't know, your long dreads and, Rastafari, colors, and they'll be like, this isn't Britney Spears. They're going to know right away, like whatever and so, don't deceive. But, often with stuff like Google, if they can tell so you want to be natural. I mean, I can't give like a solid number of don't use more than this, but just be natural. Yeah. Don't try too hard. Just be natural, and you'll be fine.
But just think about the words you're using, and maybe they need to be more
deliberate.
Descriptive.
Yeah, be deliberate. Don't be afraid to be deliberate and use those words, but don't go overboard.
One thing you touched on, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about, was that marketing's about a relationship, and before you ask for anything, that that relationship needs to be in place. How do you go about building that relationship, and how do you know that you've gotten to the point where you have that relationship with your fans and the people you're trying to market to before you start saying, hey, this is what I'm selling, or this is what I need you to buy?
Okay. Well, all right. So yeah, let's back up in that process then. So the end thing is the action. You're trying to get them to act, to buy, vote, donate, whatever. And influence is a thing before that, before you can ask. And relationship is what builds up, building up a relationship over time leads to that, it leads to that influence. But the relationship has to start somewhere, okay? And it starts with permission. Okay, so your prime directive is to get people's permission to start a relationship with them, okay? To contact them on a regular basis through your email newsletter and or through your podcast, or, whatever the case may be. And, the thing that most musicians are probably familiar with right now is the email list. And again, I hope everyone here at their shows has the list and is passing it around and pointing it out, 5 times on stage, because that is about the most important thing you can do. If somebody is thrilled about what they're seeing you do on stage, like, this music is so cool, you better get their permission then and there. So it's all about permission on your website, on your homepage. Do you ask for permission? Do you have an opt-in for your email inbox? Do you have a subscribe to my podcast now? You want to get people to raise their hand and say, yeah, you know what? It's pretty cool what you're doing. I'd like to know more. I'd like to. So, at all points of contact, are you going for that permission? That is your prime directive. Because the most important thing that you have as a musician is that loyal community, the relationship with the loyal community. Okay. You can have 100 hits and it doesn't matter if you haven't built up some people who care. So excuse me. So it all starts with that permission. So once you have the permission, then it's a matter of you send out the email newsletters on a regular basis. Try for weekly if you can. And it just needs to be a bit of contact, a little bit of, information. Here's what's up. Here's what's coming next. And talk about yourself. Don't be afraid to talk about yourself. And do not underestimate the little stories. I mean, just picture one of the bands or artists that you're the most excited about and think, what are the kinds of things I wish I could know about that person's life? There are people out there who it's the same thing for you. And I know that may sound intimidating to some people, but it's true. And it just works for developing those things. So get the permission, contact them regularly through the email newsletter, through releasing podcasts. We haven't talked about blogging, but that's another great venue that or channel that you can use, and release those things on a regular basis. Just bits of content, little snippets of song, little stories, whatever the case may be. And it could be your philosophy on life too. They might be interested in that. So here's how you know. Here's some of the things when you know that relationship is taking place. Well, when people, I'll send out an email newsletter blast because I have some for different businesses and things that I have. And without fail, somebody will hit reply and say something back to me. Okay. And I personalize all my emails, even though it might go out to 5,000 people. The system I use, it puts their first name up there. It's like, hey, Jason, did you know, blah, 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 and they'll just reply like it was and I write my emails like it was only going to them. They're the only person receiving this email is the way I write the email. So if you're doing that kind of thing and then you got a few people replying to you, that's good. When you see two-way communication, not just one way you send something out, but that two-way communication is starting. So that two-way communication may be in the form of replying to your emails. It may be in the form of commenting on your MySpace page. It may be in the form of commenting on your blog if you're using a blog, which is also a very cool thing for bands to do. It could come in the form of, maybe you even have a voicemail line, which is a great thing to have for a podcast, and say, hey, call in and give us your thoughts, give us your questions, give us your whatever disagreements about what we're doing or saying. And, when people start having that two-way interaction, that's when you know that the relationship is starting to take place. And so when you see that interaction going, then, that's when you can start feeling like, okay, you know what, now getting them to act is going to be more just asking, they're going to be more than happy to tell two people about my new CD. They're going to be more than happy to show up at my concert this Friday because that relationship is starting to be in place. So watch for the interaction, foster it. I'll give them the channels to do it, commenting, etc. And then when that starts happening, the relationship is starting to take.
I think that's one thing that, like you said, the artist's only asking when they had a CD for sale. And I think for some reason, many artists feel like they're bothering people by letting them know, but it's really something that the listener or your fan wants from you. And then they want you to include them in the process, but sometimes we feel like we're intruding on them by trying to include them. And you just need to see it a little differently. You mentioned email lists. How can you manage an email list effectively? Are there some things out there some tips you have?
Yeah, I mean, there's one service, one software that I use and have used and recommended it for a while. And, I know that I think they recently might have changed their pricing structure, but I think it's around $15 or $20 a month. And I know to some musicians that may seem like a lot. But when you think about the statement that I made that your relationship with your following is the most important thing that you have as an artist, I mean, the email list is one of the first things you should start. It's one of the, again, the prime directive is to get permission by getting them on that email list. And so it's one of the most important investments you can make in yourself you're a business as an artist too. And you as an artist and your fans, one of the best investments you can make is in this kind of a service. So there's a service I use is called Aweber, Aweber. And I don't know if, I'm always losing track, but I know there's some services specifically for bands too that are out there, but that's the one that I use, Aweber. And it is a service that, that's all they do is just manage email lists. And so they're good at they maintain relationships with all of the email providers like Hotmail and Google or Gmail and all of these to make sure that your stuff doesn't get filtered out as spam, because that's always going to be a big issue when you're sending lots of emails. I mean, lots of stuff that we actually want gets filtered out because spam has become such a problem. So you want one that it's automatic for people to sign up. It's automatic for them to unsubscribe. It's they give you all the kinds of just easy to put together, even HTML, nice looking graphical newsletter templates if you want. So the one that I use that gives you all that is Aweber.
I'll have to check that out. Let's move on to some of the social networking sites out there. How do you make sense of all the social networking sites out there and kind of build them into something that works for you as opposed to being a whole bunch of various distractions?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. And I know it can seem very overwhelming. You're like, how in the world do I keep up with all these different profiles? And the first advice I'd give is let's say maybe you have a MySpace page. I think that's a pretty common thing for musicians to have, but let's say you're like, I feel like I should use more of the social networking stuff, but I just don't know where to start. Don't feel like you have to do them all at once. That's one of the first things I'd say. Just choose one and put some time into it. And, don't feel like you're missing out on this and that or the other. And, I need to do Facebook and Twitter just choose one. And if you at least already have a MySpace page, but maybe aren't fully utilizing it, maybe put a little more time into that one. Or Facebook is becoming, hugely popular. Now, as a person, you can have a Facebook profile. Facebook's different from MySpace in that a band can't have a profile, a business can't have a profile, but they can have a page, what's called a page. So they just make that distinction. So you could start a page on Facebook for your band, or you could even start what's called a Twitter stream. Okay, so I just mentioned 3 there. MySpace, which I think a lot of musicians are familiar with. Facebook, which a lot of people are familiar with and is actually starting to outpace MySpace. So a great place to put a profile, and then Twitter. Now, Twitter people might be less familiar with. Have you talked about it on the show before?
Yeah, the last couple episodes we've talked about it. So
cool.
We've been getting a lot of our listeners jumping in on the Twitter bandwagon because I'm relatively new to Twitter as well. And
awesome.
And Ariel from somebody from New York, she always talks about it, and so I was like, all right. And I told her, I'm going to get in on this Twitter thing, and she's like, just stay with it. And so I started right before Christmas, and but it was right after the New Year where I really got it and was like, wow, this is a really useful tool, way beyond what I thought it would be when I started out. So a lot of our listeners are jumping in on Twitter, and they're brand new with it.
Awesome. Well, here's my take on Twitter. And so you've probably already talked about how it's a micro blog and 140 characters, those kinds of things. And it is one of those things that's very strange. You explain it, and a lot of people are like, "What? So what? I don't get it," or "That's so pointless," right? And I'll be honest, I resisted for quite a while, and then finally I decided. It was actually Ara who finally convinced me as well. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try it. And now I could probably name off 20. Legitimate reasons why I use Twitter, only one of which is because my mom digs it, like seeing what it is that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, right? So at the very least, you can just think of it, okay, if a blog seems like too much to tackle, or even a podcast seems like too much to tackle right now, maybe just start a Twitter stream, okay? And just update it a couple times a day, if that's all. And here's one way to think of it. We talked about email newsletter, and you're going to have some people who follow email newsletter, and they're anywhere from casually interested in you to rabid fans, and they're on your email list, and you maybe send something out once a week. And if you send it out more than once a week, they might be like, it's a bit much, I'll unsubscribe. I mean, you're going to have those people who are like, okay, just email me once every, a couple times a month, let me know what's up, I'll keep. But then you're going to have those people who are like, hyper followers, and it's like, they'll dig knowing that you just got a new cat and what you named it, right? Okay. And, you may have 5,000 people on your email newsletter, but there may be 500 of those people who wouldn't mind getting more every week from you, more than that one newsletter, that one email newsletter. And so, imagine one of your favorite artists, and imagine if they were on tour, and once a day you got a little text message to your phone just about their impression of the day, or something cool they did that day, or just the fact that their coffee sucked. I don't know. That might just seem really cool to you, right? Again, they're going to be those hyper followers who it's the same for, what they think about you. So Twitter, you sign up for an account. If you want, you can do it through the web. If you want, you can do it through your phone. But just think of it as for those hyper followers, giving them a glimpse into your life. It's those relationships we talked about. And the thing that connects them to you in relationships are, the stories you tell, the values that you communicate, the little vignettes of scenes of your life that you share. And Twitter just gives you a very casual, easy, and succinct, 140 characters or less way of sharing those types of things with those people. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that, like Kevin was just saying, just to start it and try it, and eventually something will probably click and you'll go, okay, this is pretty cool. And just, go find a few other musicians and follow them and see what they're doing on there. And, just get on there. And it's actually very easy to connect your Twitter account to your Facebook status. If somebody's listening to this and they do a lot of Facebook and they're familiar with their Facebook status, well, Twitter's kind of like the Facebook status just on its own. It's just a status throughout the day or week or whatever, right? And you can install the Facebook app, a Twitter application inside of Facebook that automatically takes your Twitter updates and puts it as your Facebook status. And I actually do that. So I only have to update it Twitter, but everybody in Facebook gets it too. And a lot of times I'll Twitter something, or tweet it as people say. And, some people respond to me on Twitter and some people will respond to me on Facebook, and I interact with them in both places. Again, I'm trying to make myself show up wherever my market, wherever my following wants to connect with me. But don't feel like you have to do that all at once. Just, pick one of those and put a little more effort into using it to connect with people, and to, put yourself out there and let people interact back with you.
Well, I know you do a lot of online marketing and things like that. Before we wrap this up, I'm just curious where you think things might be heading in the next few years as far as the way people use the internet. Obviously, MySpace was the thing a couple years ago, and now it seems like people are moving away from that and interacting on the web a little differently. I'm just curious where you think things might head.
Well, I wish I had some magic crystal ball prediction for you, but, just the good tried and true strategy that I've found of, just putting yourself out in as many channels as you possibly can. And, instead of being overwhelmed by that prospect, just think over the last couple years, some of the, we can call them micro celebrities that have shown up. It is an amazing time in pop culture. YouTube has made a kid in his basement, many kids in their basement, hugely popular. It's crazy. And even Facebook, it's wild what it can do. And here's the thing is, you as a musician, to be fulfilled in what you're doing and maybe even make a living at what you're doing, you don't even need to be as big as, whoever these days. I don't know, Jay-Z and, I don't know. But you might only need to have 5 or 10,000 people who follow you online through YouTube, Facebook, MySpace, these few different places. And there's so many channels. It's absolutely possible to do that. There's a girl on YouTube. Go check her out, Julia Nunes, Nunes, and she plays covers on her ukulele. And she now has last time I looked, I think it was 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. And so essentially she's kind of doing a podcast through YouTube. She just puts up every week or so a song or answers questions. And now she has 50,000 followers, and she was opening up for Weezer last year. That's what it led to for her. Okay. And those 50,000 followers, on YouTube, now she's able to do a lot of cool things she's always wanted to do with her music. There's another band, less followers on YouTube, but one actually a friend of mine plays in Brooklyn called The Pearl and the Beard, and they do a Sunday brunch on YouTube. Okay, and they just put up a 10-minute video. Another great example of just the types of things you can put out on a regular basis to connect with people. Now, what in the world was my original point? Okay, so the original point was, just think about the power that you have in your hands. It's a fantastic time for musicians. So, I don't have any magic, crystal ball thing for absolutely Facebook is it. It's going to always be organic and always be changing. And yes, Facebook is, more popular than MySpace and passing it up now. But again, just pick something and try it out, and then just think if there's a way to take that and immediately put it over into another channel. So let me explain what I mean by that. You can, for instance, record a video and post it to YouTube. Extract the audio from that, turn it into an audio podcast, put it in iTunes. And then maybe you post that also to your blog and to MySpace as well. Or maybe you take that one audio and you post it to like your 4 or 5 different social networks. But just take, do one piece of content and then see if you can get it out there through 5 to 10 different channels. Like all this stuff we've been talking out here. Send it to your email newsletter, get it, And so I just say, you have the power in your hands with everything on the internet to absolutely make your dreams happen with music as an artist, because there's so many great tools out there and more than ever. And so just make them work for you, but just take it one step at a time, incrementally. And next thing you know, you're going to have, this incredible army of promotion out there working for you, and you didn't even have to hire a publicist to make it happen. So,
well, I saw online that you had said creating relevant continual content is part of the key, and
absolutely
just getting that throughout those channels.
Absolutely.
Well, appreciate you coming on the podcast.
I love it.
It was lots of great information. I know that our listeners are going to just love digging into and probably get themselves putting more stuff out there on a continual basis and paying a little more attention to what they're doing online. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see what everyone does, because I have a soft place in my heart for musicians, having been one myself in the past. So as you can tell, I'm very excited about this stuff. So it's been my pleasure.
If someone wants to get in touch with you, where can they reach you?
Well, they can go check out my site at jasonvanorden.com, JasonVanOrden.com. And, often I talk about things in the context of business and entrepreneurs and things like that. But a lot of the content I'm going to be putting out in 2009 is going to be about connecting with that community of followers. And whether it's to make money as a business, whether it's to build a fan base as musicians, whether it's to raise money as a nonprofit, the principles all apply. So if this type of stuff interests you, I would love to have musicians, involved in what I'm doing at my site and the content that I'm putting out there, and connecting with me and telling me the success stories that they're having. So that's where you can find me, JasonVanOrden.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason.
No problem.
Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, we love it when you join in on the conversation. So if you have a comment or a question, feel free to call our listener line at 206-426-5683. That number is also on our webpage, cdbabypodcast.com. And we'll be playing your comments on the next roundtable edition of the show, which will be next week. Plus, there's the comment section or email, info@cdbabypodcast.com. And of course, you can find me on Twitter. We'll catch you next time. Bye. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.